Just ahead, we sit down with Bob Daiber, a Democratic candidate for governor and former Regional Superintendent of Schools for Madison County, and ask him why he decided to run for the office and get his thoughts on school funding reform, Illinois as a sanctuary state, how he would deal with the state's growing pension debt, and why it matters that he's a downstate candidate. This runs about 20 minutes.
Bob Daiber, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
Thank you for having me today.
You're running for governor. You're the only downstater running for governor. So right off the top, why should you be the next governor?
Well, I think the residents of the state of Illinois need to have representatives from all the states in our constitutional offices, and it's been 20 years since someone has even ran for governor from downstate. I think the issues that we see in Springfield about the state of Illinois and the disconnect, I think could be healed if someone from downstate served in the executive branch of government and brought that perspective to Springfield. I also will govern from Springfield. That's often a question that is answered. Will you live there? Will you govern from there? And that's where the capital is, and that's where I will administer from. I think that my candidacy brings a real dimension to the race because of the very fact that there's a much bigger perspective looked at in all of Illinois rather than so much concentration that's put into the Chicago area.
It's a daunting task for anyone to run, but much less somebody who doesn't have millions of dollars of personal wealth, especially when you look at Mr. Pritzker in the Democratic field, which you are in, and the governor with his money. What prompted you? What was the driving force that said, it's very important that I take on this task?
Well, you know, I believe in democracy, and I don't believe elections ought to be bought, and I have more political wherewithal than just the ability to write a check. And so I took this task on because I believe the person who could be the best governor for this state is someone who understands how everyday people live and work. And that's something that I know and I understand, and I think that's something that we're lacking, is that we lose focus on the true taxpayers of the state. And those are the people that get up every day and go to work. They pay all their taxes. They're not getting exemptions. They're not getting write-offs. And they're working just as hard as they can to raise their families and to do everything right. And that's the life I live.
Let me ask, was there any particular issue that you said, I can't abide this, and I'm going to take this task on?
Well, I think education funding, you know, looking at just this past year again, where we were to August before we could come up with a funding measure for our schools. And I'm a career educator. I've spent 38 years in this business, and I really know education finance. I've been a teacher. I was an administrator. I've worked on grant programs. I submit all the claims. I'm a regional superintendent. I'm directly involved with the management of education in this state, school breakfast programs, the gamut. So if you want someone in Springfield that can straighten this out, I'm the person who can do this. So I said that in my career, if I could leave one thing for the good of this state, it would be a better funded education system, a better quality public education for the next generation, and an Illinois that is ready for the 21st century to have an educated workforce and prosperity.
Well, we just passed a new funding formula for the state, as you mentioned, in August. Are we now? Is that problem now fixed, or what are your thoughts on that funding formula?
Well, we're into the second semester of school, and it's still not operable yet. We haven't received one payment yet from the new funding formula. There's money
going
flowing.
Forward, let me just, and
going
I know
formula, does it?
Yeah.
Well, yes. It addresses a very important issue, and that's equalized assessed valuation of property. But we are $6 billion short to make that funding formula work. So I think there's some amendments that need to take place in that funding formula, and we also have a revenue problem to really make it work. So we're going to have additional revenue for that to really take place.
One of the big issues, certainly, I think everyone would say, is the property taxes in Illinois are exceptionally high when compared to many other states. Do you have any idea of how to bring those down? And if you do, then what would be the impact? How would you not damage local school funding or local government funding?
Well, I have two different ideas. The first is the model I laid out right after the first year, and that's to move to a progressive income tax. And I really think to get that constitutional amendment passed, we're going to have some property tax relief tied to it, which would better fund schools and reciprocate funds then to taxpayers. The second plan, if that couldn't pass, is that we would go with an educational support funding mechanism directly tied to income tax that would reciprocate on lower property taxes and our lower property tax rates. Those are the two factors that school districts look at as far as how much revenue that they're going to gain from the property tax system. And hopefully we could reduce the need for passing bond referendums. As we have in some of our counties, we've passed a county facility sales tax, which is relaxing the need for property tax referendums now for building and school construction. So I would like to see us able to use an income tax base for instructional purposes in the state, which would also reduce the need for ed tax rate increases that we see that are tied to property taxes.
I want to get into a couple of other issues, but because a lot of people are still unaware necessarily of your background, why don't you give us a little bio? What is your life experiences that would bring those qualifications to the governorship?
Well, first and foremost, I come from a farm family. I was born and raised in that. I'm a fourth generation farmer. I own a Centennial farm in Madison County. We still own and operate part of that operation. The others is leased out. I've been an educator for 28 years. And I was a career and technical teacher. The last 10 years, I've been Regional Superintendent of Schools in Madison County, and I served statewide as the president from 2010 to 12. In addition to that, when I was a teacher, I served on a city council. I have local government experience. I've been a township supervisor. I served as a county board representative in county administration before I became a county-wide elected official. So that's 20 years of experience in local government. And it's local government that really makes the state work, and you really need to understand how corporate personal property replacement tax works, how revenue sharing in the state works, how federal grants help communities, all experiences that I've had in my years of service in local government.
Jeannie Ives is running against the governor, and one of the two primary reasons she cites, although there's more than two, but one is his signing the bill that would allow for taxpayer funding for abortions, and the other signing the bill that she would say makes Illinois a sanctuary state. Mm-hmm. What are your positions on both of those issues?
Well, I said that I would have signed HB 40 because I do not believe that we should...
Which is the taxpayer funding of the abortion.
Right,
You
right.
said you would have?
I would have, because the simple reason is that it's going to be tied to state Medicaid on insurance. And that's just where we are currently at. And I said that I would sign the bill because I do not want to go back to days of pre-Roe versus Wade, even if the Supreme Court would reverse it. I saw that. I saw the controversy of it. And so, yeah, I would have signed it. The other issue that is at stake is that we have to collectively look at how we are as a society. It's accepted, and it's a very controversial issue. I personally am pro-life, but that's my choice as to how I stand on that.
And what about the sanctuary state?
Well, I said that I uphold Illinois as a sanctuary state, and I do so because of the very fact that I'm not for deporting immigrants, because they have children here, and I said that I would not create a state of orphans in the state of Illinois, that these families would leave their kids behind for us to take care of. I also think it's the humane thing to do, that we have been a land of immigrants, and we should help these individuals become citizens of the state of Illinois, citizens of the United States, be taxpayers, be business people, and work in our economic structure.
I have a friend who has a child who is developmentally disabled. Mm-hmm. And she has made a big point of saying, there's only so many dollars to go around.
Right.
and that children like her child, who's an American citizen, often are not getting the monies they need because there's so much demand on the system from those who are here illegally. What do you say to someone like that?
Well, first and foremost, the cuts that have been made in this past administration that have hurt many of our residents who have disabilities should be looked at as we generate new streams of revenue, such as I've mentioned from progressive tax. I say to those citizens that they have a true beef, that they look as they're being shortchanged. But I'm not for turning my back on anybody that's in need, and I don't relate the immigrant population taking money from the disabled individuals.
One of the primary issues and strains on the state budget is, as everyone I think now knows, the growth of the state pension system. It used to be about 5% of our budget as recently as around the year 2000, 2001. Now it's about 25% of our operating budget. As we tape this, the state is going to be taking a look at a proposal to maybe borrow, since interest rates are so low, some billions of dollars that it's projected would save the state something like $100 billion over a 50-year period. I don't know, because that's going to be a hearing tomorrow, if you've even had a chance to get your head wrapped around that. But what would your approach be? Have you given any thought to how we can manage the operating the state of Illinois and yet at the same time make those payments to the pension system?
Sure. Well, you know, first of all, let's be truthful about what the pension costs each year and what we can put in the budget to make our pension obligations, because every annuitant wants to be paid in whole each and every year, and that will be my first and foremost concern, that that money is in the budget. Then to make that pension obligation, we could best make that pension obligation if we had additional revenue, and we know that. And that's why, as I previously stated, my progressive tax plan asks for 1% of retirees, because it would be constitutional to ask for 1% of for taxation on pensions. And that money would be used to help make that pension obligation.
So you would tax their pension
at 1%.
At 1% of what they
At 1%. You know, the whole issue of the unconstitutional part of the bill that was passed was that it deprived annuitants from what they were awarded constitutionally. We could pass taxation on pensions, and the modest amount that I'm talking about helps us make the interest payment on the debt that we would need to borrow to make those pensions whole. We are not going to fix this with fairy dust. There's no way there's anybody going to tell you that the money is there to make this pension obligation and fund all the things that we've talked about today. There has got to be additional revenue. And I do believe this, is that if everybody pays some income tax in this state, everybody, because we have too many people that pay none, and if everybody pays some, we are going to generate the revenue we need to have our pension system whole, and then to be able to reinstate services like to the disabled family that you had mentioned. If we continue to allow more and more tax breaks in the state of Illinois, more and more people don't pay income tax, especially the wealthy, that don't pay their fair share, we are going to continue to have a deficit. We have a revenue problem in the state. It's no secret. People ask me all the time, what are you going to cut? I'm going to cut any duplicate administrative costs there are in my administration. That's going to be my first action, and that's what I've always done as an elected official.
You just used the term fair share, which people hear a lot, but I rarely hear people put a number on it. If we went to a progressive income tax, what is the percentage of tax you would apply to those who are wealthy, and what would constitute wealthy?
Well, I said anyone that made over $1 million should pay 6%.
In annual income?
Annual income, right.
Pay 6%?
Pay 6%. And I also said that individuals making less than $45,000 would receive a tax cut.
As we started off, you were the only downstater. What difference does it make being a downstater?
Well, it's simple. Some of it is your perception of the whole state of Illinois, is that this is a big state. There's 102 counties, not one. And there's large land masses. It's understanding that agriculture is the biggest business in the state of Illinois, and understanding and knowing what it looks like, and knowing how it operates and how it functions. That's part of being a downstater, and also understanding the commerce that transports in and out of the state by our highway systems, because I'm often asked about, do I feel that downstate gets too much of the motor fuel tax funds? And you know, we have a lot of highways south of I-80. So that's what makes me different, in that I see this and I see the needs of downstate residents. I think that some candidates that are in the race only see the needs of Chicago residents. In fact, some are so zoned in, I think they're running for the mayor of Chicago or the governor of Chicago, not the governor of the state of Illinois. This is an entire state. Everybody in the state of Illinois has needs. Everybody in the state of Illinois has wants. And everybody in the state of Illinois deserves the same services.
There's so many things they ask, and time is growing sharp, but one of the complaints amongst the business community is that our workers' comp is too high, as well as our property taxes, and that it's hard to stay in Illinois and operate and still make a profit. And so we see any number of people either opting not to come to Illinois with businesses, or some businesses looking possibly to leave. Do you have any plans to make the business environment better in Illinois?
Sure. In fact, I serve on the Southwestern Leadership Council, and one of our tasks of the Labor Management Committee was to look at workers' compensation, which we have. And we have got some very interesting data that I think we can share on workers' comp legislation reform. I do not believe that businesses' workers' comp premiums should go up when year after year after year they show no claims. I'm for structuring a workers' comp program similar to your car insurance. If you don't have any claims, your premiums don't go up.
And lastly, one of the complaints that the governor had initially about the school funding formula, it doesn't have to be tied to that, but as an approach, Chicago as a city has many financial problems. The city schools of Chicago have many financial problems. Some people say that they're practically speaking bankrupt. Should the state of Illinois be on the lam for bailing out Chicago? If you were the governor, what would your approach be if the mayor of Chicago came to you and said, we need a bailout?
Well, here's the thing. I've previously just stated that I believe this is a whole state. Chicago is not separate. Every child in Chicago deserves the same quality public education that every child in Springfield does. And every child throughout the state should be looked at as the same. I saw where a legislator went to Springfield and asked for a bailout of East St. Louis schools. So we have economically deprived areas throughout the state that sometimes need additional assistance. But I would hope that in my administration we would fix the way that we're financing all schools in Illinois, that this wouldn't need to be necessary.
Well, Bob Daiber, we appreciate you joining us. Time is short, and I know you're busy on the campaign trail, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm glad sharing my perspective with you and the viewers.
Thanks.
You bet.